WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Lightbridge Health Sports Medicine Institute in Owings Mills. Of course, Dr. Kevin Crutchfield joined us last week talking about skiing and concussions and ice injuries, as well as Dr. Craig Bennett, who's going to come on this week. I'm going to have my Stan Stasiak left arm band thing. I'm going to get the official name of that, too. He gave it to me last time. I can't pronounce it. They're up in the Foundry Row in Owings Mills. They can pronounce it. They are the pros. They're there. They're the new game plan for sports-related injuries, backed by the surgeons and the docs who treat the pro athletes and the pro broadcasters as well. Cal Ripken looks great up on those billboards, and you can find them out in Foundry Row and find them here at WNST.net, where we're always informing you of all the cool stuff they're doing at Lightbridge Health Sports Medicine Institute. Chris Pike is here. He's an aging weekend warrior. Only thing gets hurt on him right now are his feelings, I think, at this point. Off-season here for football, off-season for the Bahamas Bowl, not off-season for Mount St. Joe, and I know you're watching your Morcells and all your Mount St. Joe guys do it from down there in Flowery Branch in Atlanta, but how's it holding up here in the aftermath of the Super Bowl in Atlanta? Feels like Atlanta pulled the Super Bowl off without a hitch, right? I saw you at the game there around first quarter, and everything went okay, and even Tom Brady won again. How about that?
Yeah, I thought Atlanta did a good job. I mean, it's tough in a downtown Atlanta, as I've told people before. It's a little small for a downtown area where they had the Super Bowl located and all the events around it. And I've told people that I was trying to get back the Flowery Branch Saturday night after working, and that was an Olympic-sized crowd. I had not seen that many people crammed into downtown like that for an event since the '96 Olympics. It literally took me an hour to get out of the downtown area, which almost never happens when you're trying to make your way to the interstate. And that's how many people made their way down to be a part of the Super Bowl festivities. You kind of even on the outskirts of Super Bowl Live, it's attending Olympic Park and some of the other events. There were concerts going on at State Farm Arena. There was just a ton of things going on for people to do if you were in town for the Super Bowl, and even if you did or didn't have a ticket to the game, you had a chance to be a part of it in some way. And I think Atlanta did a very good job. I mean, the weather was colder maybe than most people thought it would be during the week, but after some kind of a dreary morning start, I thought the day was perfect for the game itself. Well,
Other than the grits and the peach cobbler and the fried chicken and the biscuits, I don't miss a thing about it. But I'm happy to be back home. It does happen quickly, right? Like next week's going to be Combine. I am not going this year. I'm sort of famously just skipping it. I'm just done with the Combine for now and the media access, and it's not a lot of fun, and it's in Indianapolis, and it's just I don't want to be there next week, so I'm not going. I'm doing some charity stuff with the National Kidney Foundation next week, doing some other stuff. But in the meantime, we were all sort of waiting for the when and the why and the where on Flacco. And I know you're on our WNST tech service, and, of course, brought to you by Coons Ford Security Boulevard. So you were awakened by it by like everyone else at 11 o'clock in the morning. It is amazing how it happens, and now we find that the Redskins were the trailing team in this, and Flacco will now go out to Denver. This is sort of a dawning of a new era for Ravens fans here, and it's the first time one of our guys has really been dealt off. Flacco, Reed, all these guys kind of stayed to the end. This is the first time we've given a quarterback, we've had a quarterback who won a Super Bowl. This is our first Johnny U being dealt off. It's interesting in the aftermath how appreciated Flacco suddenly was now that he's gone, right?
Yeah, it's always easy to look back and say, okay, the guy was a Super Bowl MVP. He had one of the greatest postseasons in NFL history in leading the Ravens to the Super Bowl 47 title. There was a lot of good things that Joe Flacco did in Baltimore. He stabilized the quarterback position, which was kind of a dumpster fire for a few years prior to, and maybe a dumpster fire for a few years after, depending on what happens here with Lamar Jackson and how he pans out at quarterback. But he gave the Ravens a stability at the position. He was as good as there ever been in the postseason. He did what you asked your quarterback to do: get you a Super Bowl title, and that's what he did. And unfortunately for him, post Super Bowl, didn't live up to what he did for that period of time. But I think when you look back on it, people say, well, maybe he didn't get all the receivers that the Ravens could have helped him with. Maybe, he didn't have as much help on the offensive line as he could have had. Maybe Joe regressed a little bit in the last few years. His age and injuries kind of caught up to him a little bit. So I'll be very interested to see how Joe reacts in Denver and what he's able to do with a Broncos team that they have their problems also at wide receiver too. So he's going to have a little bit of work to do out there. And, John Elway, I think, took a little bit of a risk here, but he hasn't had much luck picking quarterbacks, with the exception of Peyton Manning. They got him a Super Bowl title, and they're still looking for a formula that will work for them for a few years. So maybe Joe's the answer out there, and maybe he'll be re-energized being in a new organization.
Well, there is a perception as to whether you can win a Super Bowl with a quarterback, right? Like, do you wake up with a guy you can win the Super Bowl with? And I go back to this time last year and thinking, well, as long as we have Flacco, we're going to be okay. I don't go to bed that way with Lamar Jackson yet. And I don't feel like the Ravens are a Super Bowl contender as compiled right now, and that's with or without Suggs, Weddle, Yanda, Mosley, who's going to be the next story coming up here. This is a fascinating offseason in that Harbaugh now has job security, right? DeCosta clearly has, I don't want to say carte blanche, but certainly has the keys at this point, or at least we're led to believe that he has the keys and that it will somehow be driven a little differently, maybe a lot differently, who knows, right? But he's been in on every decision, but not the decision maker. And here we go now with, where is the limit on Mosley? How far would they go with him? How do they feel about Suggs? How do they feel about Weddle? How do they feel about Yanda? Well, we found out how they felt about Flacco, and it wasn't very good, right?
Well, I think that was part of where they are. They just decided that they made the move for Lamar Jackson. He's going to be the starting quarterback, so that made Joe and his contract expendable, and that's the fact of life in the NFL. You can sign a big deal like he did, but eventually it becomes some cap pressure involved with that. Sometimes you don't want that kind of money tied up with a guy who's not going to be your starting quarterback. So they made a business decision that most NFL teams will make. And I think you and I and Luke had a nice conversation down in Atlanta prior to the Super Bowl talking about what's going to be different under DeCosta. And you're right. He's been in on every decision, but he hasn't been the guy pulling the trigger. And every guy who comes into that position, every person becomes a general manager, has their own ideas on how they would run the shop. And so now we're going to get to see, as Ravens fans and observers, how Eric DeCosta will run the Ravens shop going forward. And, we'll all be dissecting what's different from what he's doing, from what Ozzie would have done in the same situation. But sometimes it's good after a long period of time to get some fresh eyes on the franchise, on where you are as a team, where you think you're going to be. And, and again, I tell people, general manager is somewhat easy in a 1-year vacuum. It's on your board in the room that's closed up that nobody can see until you're in the room by yourself. You open up that board, you look 2 or 3, 4 years down the line, and you say, okay, this guy's contract's up in 3 years. This guy's contract is up in 2. This guy's a restricted free agent. This guy's an unrestricted free agent in 3 years. It's the long-range planning that general managers do that's the most fascinating, because that's where the real puzzle piecing, as I like to call it, comes into play. How do you long-term put together the Ravens in 3 or 4 seasons? You kind of know where you're going to be in 19, but where are you in 2021 and 22? How do you set yourself up to be successful in those windows going forward? And I think that's where the new ideas come in here, and that's what's going to be so fascinating.
Chris Pika joining us. He, of course, is Blog and Tackle, the pride of Mount St. Joe, and a Greyhound of Loyola, but never a Don, and former insider in minor league baseball and the National Football League. Now doing a lot of work with the Pro Football Writers as well as Bahamas Bowl. You can follow him at Blog and Tackle from Flowery Branch and from our beginnings. By the way, Pika, I found a News American part-time employee pass that, amidst all my wrestling tickets that I put out on the internet over the weekend. So I did have a little News American feel there for you and a little throwback for you. Anything you want to say in regard to the baseball collusion and the Harper Machado thing. And I don't bring this up with you much, and I know you and I have talked Orioles here a lot over the last 5 years, quite frankly, because you're a baseball guy, but you've spent a lot of time at SunTrust Park with the Braves. You do a lot of broadcast work with baseball folks, including Joe Angel and the Orioles team when they come in from time to time to Atlanta and other places. You love baseball. Boy, I mean, you're in a baseball town that's, had a little rejuvenation last year for what the Braves represented and where they are. This is an ugly thing, I think, for all fans of baseball, what Machado and Harper are dealing with in a marketplace where the owners are now soaked with money and don't want to give it up.
Well, I think what's changed, and I'll go back to my days in Birmingham. We had Terry Francona as our manager in '94 when I had Jordan my first year with the Barons full time. Francona left us in '95. The White Sox hired Mike Heath, who was a former catcher in the major leagues. Mike had been out of the game a few years, but wanted to get back in as coach. Inexplicably, the White Sox made him the Double-A manager, he was sort of the antithesis of Terry Francona. He was not the smooth, polished guy who was a player's manager. He was kind of growing into the job. And quite honestly, Mike Heath's obsession was not about what the players he had in the clubhouse. Heath was part of a previous collusion case, the last collusion class that Major League Baseball was involved in. And Mike was, having to do some depositions and trying to find information.
Yeah, I'm looking at Mike's 85 season in Oakland, where, by the way, I had his baseball card. So when you said Mike Heath, I pictured him with the helmet on the 1981-82 baseball card, Oakland A's, the whole deal, Billy Ball, the whole deal. He had 13 home runs, drove in 55 ribs, and batted .250 in 430. I mean, he was a hitting catcher with the Oakland A's in the mid-'80s. Right. He was in line to get paid, literally, right?
Right. And he did get money out of the collusion settlement from those days. And so, you're talking about a guy, yes, he was a good hitting catcher, but he wasn't a superstar like Machado or Harper, okay? And I think there's a couple of things at play. I think what's different today, and I'll be interested to see, this is sort of one of those stories, as I tell people, stories sometimes need time to breathe, okay? Stories aren't solved in 60 minutes, like CSI or, Criminal Minds or whatever you watch on TV on police procedurals. Sometimes stories need to breathe, and sometimes stories like this with Machado and Harper and other players and why they're not in camp, why they're not, currently with teams. I think this is a longer form story that may take a year or two to unravel.
It started last year, right? I mean, last year, the money just dried up. And at a point where this time 2 years ago, we were talking about Adam Jones getting paid. This time last year, we're like, Adam Jones might not get paid. He might not be worth. And now this year, it's like Adam Jones might never play again. You know what I mean? Not to say, but hey, Adam, $1.5 million. You want to come play this year? Well, that's what we've decided your value is here on the new union scale. Dude, there's going to be war. I've watched baseball for 40 years. These owners smell weakness now in the Players Association when they're negotiating for seats on buses and planes and, how big their bed's going to be at the Westin, how dreamy their bed's. These are the things they were bargaining for, Boy, oh boy, I go back to Curt Flood and reading the history of baseball and, seeing the Messina thing happen to Hall of Fame and thinking about all the years through all of this. This is the first time, boy, the owners have been waiting to crack down on the players. Man, when they could crack down on Harper and Machado and there's no stray George Steinbrenner or Mike Ilitch in the corner ready to... Although the Padres and the White Sox look to be a little renegade right now, right? Like they're the outsiders looking to lean in here and set the market. But it's a whole different level of market right now, and I think there's a whole different level of history for guys like you and me have a little silver in our beards, that we understand this far better than Manny Machado or Bryce Harper. You were driving around in buses in the South with Mike Heath, for crying out loud.
Right, and I think that there's a couple, like I said, there's a couple things at play here, and it's certainly, I think, the owners, what they want to do with their profits and what they feel the game should be and the salary structure should be, that's certainly a big part of it. I think what has changed since the last time we said this, the collusion word, was the analytics are so much different now. Players are being graded by analytics departments that are 25 and 30 deep. They're looking at guys' contracts. They're looking at the the Albert Pujols 10-year contract and think, boy, that was a mistake, okay? You can look at the Chris Davis contract and say the same thing at this point. Oh, it still has 4 years to run. There's been a lot of money thrown around at guys on guaranteed deals that have not panned out. Now, playing against that argument is the fact that Machado and Harper are very young. They're way younger than 29, which would be sort of the median age when you're supposed to be at your peak as a baseball player for the most part. So a 7-year deal at 300, 350 is a pretty good investment for a baseball team for a guy who's 25 or 26. And those deals are not coming to the moment. I think eventually both will be signed, but what the numbers are going to be will be different. I think what you're not seeing is, I think you and I both remember, Ted Turner would throw crazy money out there. Steinbrenner would throw crazy money out there. All it takes is one owner to go, I got to have this guy. Salary structure be damned. I am going to.
Oh, dude, we can go back. I mean, you and our baseball nerds. We can talk about Matt Young. We can, we talk about Bobby Bonilla still getting paid. I mean, we can go through any number of Alex Fernandez's and these crazy
you need one
deals.
rogue owner. You need one guy that's willing to buck the system and say, "Hey, I'm going to sign this guy no matter what the cost is, and this is what we're going to do." And so the salary structure gets thrown out of whack because of one person who feels like, hey, I'm willing to do it. And Scott Boras and other major agents, Boras especially, plays a great game of playing one team off of another. But if you don't have two teams to play off of each other to say, hey, I've got X amount, my last proposal from Team A was, 7 years at 300, and you've got to do better than that. Otherwise, we're going to Team A. Team A may or may not have made that proposal, but Boras was always really good, has always been good at playing teams off of each other to get the best deal for his clients. That's what he's supposed to do as an agent. And unfortunately, there's not really a lot of back and forth between Team A, Team B, and Team C. The teams that basically said, this is our salary structure. This is what we're willing to pay. If you want to come play for us, great. If you get a better deal from somewhere else, we're not going to get in a bidding war. And we're not going to do what the Orioles did several years ago, was getting a bidding war with themselves for Chris Davis and overpaying on a contract. And a lot of teams got caught in that trap by very good agents. So I think team analytic departments are obviously, analyzing these players to the nth degree. I think general managers and owners are looking at this differently now as far as salary structure. Baseball, much like football, is now becoming much younger. Players above 30 years old are not valued nearly as much as you get into 34, 35. The market used to be you could get maybe one more deal at 35 that was really, really good to get you down to retirement if you still could hit the baseball. Now those deals are not out there as much. They're valuing the much younger players at those numbers. And when it's time to move on, you're back to 22, 23, 24-year-olds back in the majors. So it's a different time. And like I said, I think this is a longer form story that may take a year or two to play out. But I think you're right. I think the next bargaining, the next CBA between the owners and the players in baseball is going to be very interesting to see how that comes about.
Well, it certainly wouldn't be the case, Chris, and this is my homework for you, Chris Pika, is next time we get together, maybe next week after, whenever it's going to be, whenever you make 20 minutes for me, I want you to take over the Orioles. Since this John Vitamin guy, I don't believe he's really running the Orioles anywhere because I haven't heard from him, seen him. Nobody's seen him. Nobody's met him. He's kind of like a Canadian ghost or something like that. But I'm going to let you run the Orioles next time we get together. And you can tell me sometime between now and March 1st what you would do when you take over president, CEO. When I buy the Orioles, I'm going to make you the boss and bring you in because you're so qualified. And then you can tell me what you're going to do with an organization that's going to lose 100. I mean, Luke and I are arguing whether they're going to lose 97 or 107 games. But either way, they're going to lose a lot of baseball games. And they've done literally nothing. So, we're now out on the end of February. You can't even get their tickets. You can't buy opening. It's really a crazy thing. So I want you to sort of marinate on it. And I want you to speak at length about it because I'm going to be going after the Orioles here the next 5 or 6 weeks because opening day is coming. And if we don't talk about them now, when, right? So it's baseball season.
Yep.
Should be anyway. 2 television networks too, Chris. I'm going to give you MASN 1 and MASN 2, okay? So you get to control them. You get the team. You can't have the Nationals. You might have to write them a check. But I want to know what you would do to market really bad baseball, because you were in minor leagues. That's not Major League Baseball, but people come out and love it, and we're a part of it. I want people to tell me why they're going to fall in love with this Orioles team, why they're going to go to the ballpark. Chris, love you, appreciate you. Any news from Pro Football Writers Association? Any awards still left to be given or anything like that?
No, we're done with the on-field awards. We'll have some off-field awards, which involve inspirational players, coaches, players cooperate with the media. The writer that'll go into the writers' wing of the Hall of Fame in August. So there'll be news about that. But basically, our group's getting ready for the Combine here in a couple of weeks and get together and look at the next crop of football players getting ready to make their way to the NFL.
I got Shireen on this week. I'm going to find McClain and some of the rest of them before the month's over. And I'm good with all of them now. I mean, they're never going to let Modell in, but they put Ed Reed in. We got Ray in, so I'm chummy, hunky dory with everybody but Grossi. But all the rest of them, I'm good with at this point. All right.
Well, Shireen's tremendous. She was our McCann Award winner. She went into the Writers' Wing of the Hall of Fame last year.
I know. I introduced her as Hall of Famer.
Mother football is as good at what she does as anybody among writers in the NFL today, and she's tremendous. John McClain's great. A lot of experience among those people you're going to be talking to.
Well, Shireen can do a lot, but she can't fix the Cowboys, so I'll make sure I bring that up with her. Chris Pika here, blog and tackle in Flowery Branch, of course, from West Baltimore. And I don't know if he claims Calhoun Street or Scott Street or Pigtown. He claims Mount St. Joe. I know that, as well as the Loyola Greyhounds, but never a Don. He is blog and tackle out on Twitter, as well as with the Bahamas Bowl. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and streaming live on our Facebook, where you can see me drink from my Royal Farms coffee cup, as well as my Cole Roofing mug that has no Kona Blend coffee. And the strangest thing is I'm drinking water out of my Royal Farms cup and coffee that's from Royal Farms out of my Cole Roofing mug. Something like that. Let's see, what else? Oh, the BuyAToyota.com audio vault is there for anything you're going to miss this week. And if you miss stuff, you're going to miss a lot of cool stuff. Tom Johnston from the Doobie Brothers Band's going to be here this week. Shireen's coming on this week. I got great guests. I got some Baltimore positive news I'm going to break later on in the week as well. And if there's any breaking news on the sports side, you'll get it first on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.